Alright, welcome back. I hope you had time to finish up Miss Jones' class. Let's talk about her class and see what's going on here. We all got a mean this time of strictly equal to 71.4, I hope, because there was no rounding needed, so it was exactly equal to rather than sort of equal to or rounded. And then the median was a 69, which came here from coming in on both sides. And this time, like was asked in the previous video, there was no middle number, so we had to average the 68 and the 70, which gave us the 69. So that is our median for that one. And then, just like the last time, the median is never included in the upper half or the lower half, so we just look here and here for the quartiles, which is the median of the upper and lower halves. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Since there's 5 things in each half, there really is a middle point. See? Okay, so here's our 57 and our 77. So I hope that clears up that one. 5 number summaries here, and here they are next to each other. We talked about the skew a little, and I'll talk about that with a few more things in the graph. Do you all see anything that this comparative box and whisker plot lets you know about the two classes?
Most of Mrs. Jones' class scored lower than Mrs. Smith's class.
Okay, so most of Mrs. Jones' class scored lower than Mrs. Smith's class. Okay, well, can we put numbers on that most? So here's the part of Mrs. Jones' class over here. What can you put any numbers on that?
75%?
75% of her class is over here, right? And they're below 75% of Miss Smith's class. So that is definitely most. All right, anything else?
Could you say that 75% of Mrs. Smith's class is within the upper quartile of Mrs. Jones' class?
Yes, because this top whisker of Mrs. Jones' class is the top quartile of her class. And Miss Smith's class, 75% of their class, because there's 3/4 of the class, scored above the box of Mrs. Jones, so in her highest quartile. Yes, you could say that. Awesome. All right, let me show you a couple more things that sometimes are indicated on box and whisker plots. One of them is about the skew. Sometimes in a box and whisker plot, they'll put some kind of indication of where the mean is. I'm going to go ahead and do that for first Mrs. Smith's class, because that's what we did first. Hers was a 78.69, which is just, it's below, let's see, what was her, 77, so it's just barely in here. So that's the mean right there. And since the mean is below the median, mean below median, that gives you the skew to the left or negative. And then if we do the same thing for Miss Jones' class, her mean was a 71.4, which is above the median of 69. So 71.4 would be right around here, and that here is having the mean above the median, which gives you a positive or right skew. Some people look at it as balancing the box and whisker plot on the median and seeing which way it looks like it would tilt, and that's how they describe the skew. Lots of people describe skew different ways, but just comparing the mean and median is pretty straightforward. So Miss Jones would tip to the right, and Miss Smith here, if we balanced on the median, would tip to the left. One more thing that's frequently included in box and whisker plots, or talked about through box and whisker plots, is outliers. Can you guys identify a possible outlier in either one of the classes?
12 definitely looks like an outlier.
12 in the data set here. In Miss Smith's class, 12 is by far the lowest score, and I think we talked about that score before. It may well have been a kid in her class who had been sick and hadn't been there to learn the material for the test, or something like that. So sometimes what's done with that is they would remove the outlier. But first let's talk about the technical way of identifying outliers. To be an outlier, and it's covered in most textbooks, you have to be greater than 1.5 interquartile ranges outside the box. So this is how outlier is frequently defined. An outlier is greater than 1.5 times the interquartile range outside the box. So for Miss Smith's class, the interquartile range identified up here, the 12.5, there's the interquartile range is 12.5 here. So 1.5 times the 12.5 gives us 18.75. And if we look at each end of the box and whisker plot, these, or of the box, the quartiles, so to be more than 1.5 times the interquartile range out here is, we'd go with this number right here, which was a 77. So again, here we're doing Smith's class. A 77 minus that 18.75, which you guys can't even see what I'm writing, can you? So 77 minus 18.75 gives you 58.25, which would be right around here on the box and whisker plot. And clearly this 12 is way outside of that range, okay? And you can tell because of the scale used here that that really does look like 1.5 times the size of the box. So the 12 is definitely less than the 58.75. Let's see if we have any over here. It's pretty obvious that we don't have anything 1.5 times outside, but we're going to go ahead and check since we're doing it. We've got this Q3, which is, Q3 was 89.5 plus 18.75, the 1.5 times the interquartile range, is 108.25. Well, nobody scored 108.25 in her class. It'd be worth your while to check and see if Miss Jones has any outliers. But to be an outlier, you have to be more than 1.5 times outside of the interquartile range. And what would frequently be done, honestly, in these cases, is people would make that Smith outlier be a star, because he's an outlier, and they would redo the box and whisker plot based on having his data point or her data point removed. So I'm going to go ahead and redraw based on that data point removed. This would be a good challenge for you all. If we remove the outlier of 12, the next lowest score is a 74. So that would be way up here, which completely changes the look of this box and whisker plot. Here's the 74, and then the first quartile will be 78.5, which is right around 78.5. That's right inside the box now. So 78.5 would be here, and then it goes to 89.5, and the median would now be an 83.5. The third quartile and the whisker don't actually change because of what gets removed. So a lot of places would completely remove the outlier and then draw this as the box and whisker plot for Miss Smith's class. So just a few more little tidbits on box and whisker plots. I hope this helps with all of your homework and studies. That's all.